When Trnt heard the maiden say these things, he heaved a sigh from the depths of his heart as he remembered the lady he loved more than anyone in the world. He was so stricken that he fell to the ground, senseless. When everyone saw their captain lying there, his eyes filled with tears, they thought he had delivered up his spirit to God and his body to the ground. The doctors came and said, "Our captain must be very ill. He looks as though he's near death." King Estriano quickly had the maiden seized and her hands tightly bound. When Placer de Movia saw herself treated so badly, she angrily said, "Let me go to the captain. I nourished him from my breast before you ever heard of him. Let me use the remedies I know, because I can see that these ignorant doctors don't know how to help him." The maiden quickly sat on the ground, unfastened her robes and the blouse she was wearing down past her bosom, uncovering her breasts. She took Trnt's body, placed it in her lap, lay his head on her breasts. When the maiden saw Trnt open his eyes and sigh deeply, she was very happy, and she said, "Captain, my lord, for a long time you have been fighting us night and day. I don't want your grace to suffer such terrible hardships when I can free you from them. Begin with me. I am right here, a defenseless maiden, and your sword is very sharp. Now you can use your strong hand and bathe your sword with the blood of someone who, after God, wants to serve only you." Trnt answered as well as he could, "Maiden, it seems to me that you are like the bee that carries honey in its mouth and a stinger in its tail. I have heard things from you that have left me astonished. I want very much to know how news about that most serene princess has reached you. Tell me, I beg you, and you can count on this. In consideration of her Majesty, I will do such things for you that you will all leave here highly satisfied." Placer de Movia was very happy at the captain's reply. While they were talking, Lord Agremont came into the tent in a rage, with a bare sword in his hand. He had been misinformed by King Estriano about how Trnt had fallen into a faint in the maiden's arms. When he saw Trnt in her lap, and without noticing his captain's condition, with a fierce face and terrible voice, he cried, "What is this poisonous woman doing here, this devil worshipper? How can you all stand by, seeing that she's killed him and not beheaded her? Since the rest of you won't do it, I will." He grabbed her by the hair and jerked her head back, and he put his sword by her neck to take away her life. When Trnt saw the sword so close to the maiden and heard her cry, he seized the sword with his hands. Lord Agremont, feeling the sword against something hard, thought it was the maiden's neck, so he slashed as hard as he could and put a large gash in Trnt's hands. And, according to the doctors, Trnt was very fortunate that he was not badly injured. When Trnt saw that his cousin had shown him so little honor, he became very angry. King Estriano made Lord Agremont leave, and Lord Agremont lowered his eyes and became very ashamed. Then he bowed deeply to the king and to Trnt, and left the tent. And his humility and shame went a long way towards cooling Trnt's anger and making him feel pity instead. Then Trnt turned towards the maiden and asked her very kindly if she had been a captive in Constantinople, and he asked who had told her so many things about the princess. She quickly got up, and falling to her knees, she said, "What is this, Captain? Have you lost your memory entirely? There is a great deal of truth in the fact that where there is no love, there can be no remembrance. What? Aren't I, poor, miserable Placer de Movia, who, for your lordship, endured so much pain and misery, and finally captivity?" Trnt's eyes flew open with recognition at once, and he would not allow her to say another word, realizing full well at this moment that she was Placer de Movia. He knelt to the ground before her, embracing her and kissed her many times over. After they had embraced for a good while, Trnt ordered a beautiful platform placed at the door of the tent, covered entirely with brocade cloth above, and with satin on the sides and floor. Placer de Movia was seated at the top of the step of the platform, and covered with a mantle of crimson brocade, lined with ermine, one belonging to Trnt that he had ordered put on her since she had completely torn her robes. The lady of the city was made to sit on the top step, and her maidens below, on satin clothes. In this situation it seemed that Placer de Movia was indeed a queen. Trnt had taken the headdress off her head, and now her hair hung loose over her shoulders. He paid her such great honor that everyone thought Trnt was going to take her as his wife. He had a proclamation read throughout the entire camp that everyone should come and kiss Placer de Mavilla's hand under penalty of death. Then he had another proclamation made that everyone in the city, men and women, were pardoned, and that each of them could live under any law they wished, and that no one in the camp would dare harm anyone from the city. Afterwards he had many dishes prepared, and held a general banquet so that everyone could come who wished, and the most singular celebration ever held in the camp took place there, lasting 8 days. Placer de Mavilla begged the lady of the city to be baptized, and she answered that she would do it. Then Trnt asked her if she would marry Mesqualidic. Placer de Mavilla also pleaded with her, and the others insisted so much that she consented, and the wedding was held with great celebrations. Trnt often spent his time talking to Placer de Mavilla. One day, while they were talking about the princess and the emperor, Placer de Mavilla scolded him and asked him why if he did not forget about conquering Barbary and help the emperor and his daughter. Trnt answered that he wanted to know for certain that the situation was what the situation was in the empire before he moved. He begged Placer de Mavilla to tell him what had happened to her after she had swept over the side of the galley. With tears in her eye, Placer de Mavilla said, "I beg you, Lord Trnt, don't make me talk about it. Whenever I think about it, I would rather die 100 deaths than go on living." When Trnt heard her speaking so painfully, he said, "Rejoice, valiant maiden. I promise you, by the lady who has been the cause of your misfortune, that I will repay you. I will mix your blood with that of Roca Salada, and you will be reckoned among the women of Brittany, among whom you are certain to have the title of queen." There was a long argument between Trnt and this maiden about the marriage he had decided upon, which was between her and Lord Argumont. He gave her many different reasons, citing very holy authorities, so that Placer de Mavilla finally submitted to Trnt's will, and replied in a few words, "Your servant is here, Lord Trnt. Do with me according to your will." Trnt took a beautiful chain from his neck and placed it around Placer de Mavilla's neck as a sign of her future marriage. He had a brocade brought, and dressed her like a queen. Then Trnt sent for Lord Argumont, and he begged him at length not to refuse what he would tell him, since he had already made a promise. Lord Argumont answered him, "Lord Trnt, I am astonished that you would plead with me about anything. Just by commanding me, you are doing me a great favor." Trnt said, "Cousin, I have decided to make you King of Fez and Bogia, and give Placer de Mavilla to you as your wife. You know how indebted all of us are to her for the work she has done for us. She is a maiden of great discretion, who has led a virtuous life, and it will be very good for both of you." Lord Argumont answered, "Cousin and lord, I had no thought of taking a wife, but it is too much grace and honor for your lordship to entreat me to do a thing I should beg you for. I kissed your hand and your feet." Trnt would not allow it. Instead, he took him by the arm, lifted him up, and kissed him on the mouth. Afterwards, he thanked him both for the kingdoms and for the new wife. Trnt felt more satisfied at having arranged this marriage than by all his conquests in Barbary. He quickly had Lady Montagatta's palace decorated with beautiful gold and silk cloth, and he had all the musicians from that area come, with every kind of instrument that could be found. Then he had many dainties and special wines brought to ensure the success of the celebration. Placer de Mavilla was very richly dressed, and her presence and appearance showed that she was a queen. She was taken to the great hall where King Escrianto and Trnt were, and with many other barons and knights, along with the wife of King Escrianto and many other ladies of rank. After the wedding vows were exchanged, there was a great celebration with dances of different types and very singular foods. While the celebrations lasted, Trnt had the table prepared for everyone who wished to eat, and for a week there was great abundance of everything.